Artificial intelligence is a really hot topic nowadays. There are a bunch of ethical questions and problems that arises with that topic. So, for example, do you think autonomous weapons are something we should think carefully about?
We should certainly think carefully about autonomous weapons, as we should think carefully about actually using any weapons. So yes, we have to think about the particular dangers with autonomous weapons, whether people will use them in a way more likely than they would use weapons that have to be directly targeted because there's some human involvement. And it might be that it makes the barriers to using lethal force even less than they are now. So I do think we should be very careful about them. I'm not at this stage ready to say that they should never be used or that we should never build them or direct them, because clearly there can be benefits in saving life as well. But we certainly need to be very careful about how they're used.
I think we live now in a crisis of expertise, especially in ethics. For example, most ethical commissions, they are not very... most people who are part of that, they are politicians, they are people from medicine, but a lot of moral philosophers and ethicists, they are missing that connection with this kind of expert groups that should give ethical guidelines for society. But what we see is that a lot of ethicists, they are not part of those kind of commissions. So do you think that's a problem? Do you think, for example, that empirical science can deal with that kind of problems, or do you think there is a role for ethics or moral philosophy?
There's definitely a role for ethics in any commission that's discussing an ethical question, because empirical science can't tell you what you ought to do. There's that they can provide the facts, which can be the basis for what you ought to do, but you need to have the ethical judgment as to what values you have or what's right or wrong in these situations. But the problem you described is exactly what initially happened with bioethics as well, that the first committees and commissions to look at ethical questions raised by new developments in medicine, like, for example, the definition of death when we got respirators that could keep people breathing even though their brains had been destroyed. They also did not have ethicists. They had lawyers or doctors, maybe theologians. But yeah, and I think bioethics advanced considerably once it was recognised that you needed to have professional ethicists on these commissions.
What do you think about the idea that we should use technology to, for example, enhance like our natural properties, for example, vision or our normal senses? And do you think we should also try to use technology to prolongate or extending our life? So maybe for immortality? Do you think that's something we should try to get from as a society, or?
Well, there's no reason to think that this particular point in evolution has produced the best human beings that could ever exist. So I have no objection in principle to using technology to enhance certain abilities. Arguably we should try and get everybody's sight up to normal. I suppose that should be a higher priority than getting some people's sight to supernormal, but I don't have any objection to people having enhanced sight or hearing or other abilities. And I don't think we should be too hung up with the idea of, is this still human or not? We should be rather looking at what is the kind of beings who can have the best life, who can do the most good for others. Those should be the key questions.
Do you think that we can make the same mistake that we did with animals regarding robots? So this idea that because they don't have human level intelligence or properties in general, we didn't give moral status of animals because they were really different from human normal beings. Do you think we can make the same mistake with robots, or do you think they are not in that level of complexity?
Certainly at the moment, robots are not conscious beings. I don't think anybody claims that there really is a robot now who's a conscious being. So at the moment, we're not making any such mistake as we did with animals, because animals are and have been conscious beings, and we've ignored that. But it may be that at some stage in the future we'll get to the point where robots or artificial intelligence does produce conscious beings with interests of their own, with capacities to enjoy their life or to suffer. And if then we do ignore that, that would be gravely wrong in a similar way to how it's been wrong to ignore the interests of animals.
A specific kind of technology that is being developed now, it's the sex robots, where basically some big companies, they are developing this technology, and they argue that this can be good for society in general because it can minimize the traffic of human beings for prostitution and etc. So do you think sex robots are a good idea, or do you think there can be some dangers associated with that kind of technology?
Well, I do think it would be a very good thing if it reduced the market for sex workers who are being trafficked, who are, basically have no choice but to be in the sex trade. That's a very bad thing. I don't know really whether sex robots would ever get good enough to eliminate the desire of some people for a human being. So I'm not sure that it'll succeed in that, but it might, for example, be useful for people who are, for one reason or another, alone and unable to have sex with a human being. Maybe they don't want to pay for sex worker services anyway, even if it was somebody who was not actually trafficked. But so I think that they could have various uses like that for providing what might be a sort of second-rate kind of sex compared to sex with somebody that you're passionate about and really care about. But still better than nothing for many people. So in that sense, I think it's probably a good thing if they're developed.
Can you tell us what do you think is the best thing that artificial intelligence can give to humans, and what is the worst thing, like now or in the future?
Well, I guess the best thing that artificial intelligence can give us is ways to solve our problems smarter and more efficiently. Just for example, the proposals to use artificial intelligence in our energy systems to produce energy where and when it's needed with much less waste, and therefore to use less fossil fuel and to help to relieve the greenhouse gas problem, climate change. So, that could be a very good thing that we're quite close to. That would be one of the best things, and in the future there could be other problems, of course, that artificial intelligence could solve for us. One of the worst things that may happen is that it creates mass unemployment, that it takes jobs from people who are not able to retrain and get other equally satisfying jobs. And if we don't deal with that with good social policies to help people to support themselves and to find interesting and worthwhile things to do with their lives, then that could be a real social disaster.
So do you think the universal basic income, this idea that we should give money to everyone, do you think that's a solution for that problem? I
think universal basic income might be an essential part of a solution. But I don't think that just giving people enough money to live on without giving them something that gives sort of purpose and shape and structure to their lives is going to be enough. And so, we may have to be more creative in finding activities that people can do, even if they don't need it for the money because they're getting a universal basic income, but that they still find sufficiently rewarding, rather than just sitting around wondering what to do next and maybe in some cases getting up to trouble.